This is Pat Torman. Today I'm going to be showing you how do I win forms using the singleton pattern. Now, patterns are repeatable things you'll find across all code designs, and in this case we'll be implementing with Visual Basic Express Edition on a Vista machine. So the pattern itself, the singleton pattern, it's a little bit easier to demo than it is to explain, but we'll take a minute and I'll get you the definition here. So I went out to a definition of the singleton pattern, and I found a pretty good one. It says that the design pattern is used to restrict the instantiation of a class to one object. Okay, so what does that mean to us? There's the Wikipedia reference I found, so you can go back and take a look at it. What that means to us is that no matter how many times you create one of these things or dimension them, you'll find that it always results in the same thing. Now, this is convenient in a couple of places. One of them is if you're creating a configuration file, because your whole application probably needs one and only one configuration for its lifetime, for that instance of its lifetime. So what that means to us is that however, we have better tools in Visual Studio because we have My Settings. So I'm going to use something and demo it in a way that you can appreciate. I use it to remember a particular record and its child records if I need to pass it from one form to the next or back and forth across the application. So I have a single thing that references everything. Okay, it might sound a little bit like a global variable to you, and of course it kind of is a global variable in some ways, but a lot more controllable. And in the process, we're going to be talking about shared members, so I'm going to give you a reference here to shared members. And I want to bring up a note that in multi-threaded applications, you could have a situation where more than one thread is attempting to save to this single instance at the same time. And if more than one thing's trying to change it, of course, you have a problem that you need to address, and I'm going to refer you to the sync lock. You can also use a mutex for that. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is show you what the application does, and then we'll go back and create one from scratch. I'll fire it up. What we're going to do here is a simple little application where you're going to create one of these customers. The first I'm going to create is just me. It says Pat. And I have, see, current customer Pat. And I have no axes, no picks, and no shovels. Okay, that's what we're going to buy. This is my sort of customer and their order items. So I have one item going on right here, and its current customer is Pat. But I can assign another customer to it by saying, picking from my selection of my coworkers here, I'll give it to Grumpy. So now that single item now is assigned to the customer Grumpy, and opening another form, I'll say what the quantity is of 1, 2, and 3, and bring it back, and you'll see that Grumpy is the customer name, and I have 1 axe, 2 picks, and 2 shovels. Okay, so how did I get there and why? Well, the reason why is because I went from one form to the next by creating another reference to the exact same singleton pattern. So I'll show you how we did that, and then we'll create one. Okay, so over on my task list here where I put in a couple of references. So the first thing I want to show you is when I open the main form, we'll jump to that. And what I did here is I created the original by creating a reference to my current customer, calling it a new customer order for Pat. Then later I went to my orders form, and I made another reference, but this time I just said current customer get customer order. But again, I'm making a reference to it, so you'd think that because this is private here that it would go out of scope, but it in fact does not go out of scope. Notice here I'm not creating a new instance of it, I'm reusing the old one. And just for good measure, I showed you how I can create a reference to it as a local. I'm dimming it here behind the OK button, where I put in the customer name from whatever happens to be in the selected item. Alright, now let's write one of these from scratch. It'll help you understand how they're built. First thing I want to do is jump over to a separate project here, and I'm going to tell it that I want to add a class, and we'll call it current customer. And we'll close everybody but this. I told you that you can't new a singleton. And the reason for that is you have to have some sort of constructor that lets you create the first instance of it so that everybody can recognize it. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new sub new. Now the way we stop people from making a new one is we tell it that this is going to be private. And now you have a class no one can create, which isn't exactly what we intended to do. But it is a step in the right direction. So the next thing we have to do with this is create a way to create a new. And I'm going to drop down here and say that what we need to do now is to create a function that will access it and at the same time create a new one. So I'm going to create a public function so that if you could create one, you'd be able to see it externally. And I'm going to call it new current customer. And to create the current customer, I want to add in something like a customer name. And this time I have to have it return something. So I'm going to have it return current customer, which might look a little odd to you because it says that I'm going to return itself. And in fact I am. So to do that, I need to come up here and I have to create a private field. Who happens to be of type current customer. And now here I'd like to just return that every time I saw it. So I'd say, okay, just return it. And that should do what I want. However, at that point I didn't actually create anything new. So let me just get that going. I'm going to say what I'd like to do here is mCurrentCustomer equals new. Now to assign my customer name back to my object here, I need another private variable. And this time I'll call it cusName, who's of type string. Now when I come down here, I'll make him a little M for my modular wide flag, showing off my VB6 roots. And I'll say mCusName equals cusName. Okay, so now I've found a way by using the this function method in the class, I can return a type of current customer that actually has a particular instance of it that I created up new. Now, sometimes you'll see this overloaded where somebody can allow you to pass in a value or not, in which case it's always going to return the current customer. However, there's a little problem with singleton objects, and that's that the end user might not be you. So when somebody goes to use this, they're going to be looking for the expression new. So I cheat a little bit to remind myself of what I was doing, and I create one that says customer current with the new name so that people will see it in IntelliSense. Alright, now let's take a look at what we got to do next. Whenever you call new, you want to make sure you call MyBase. And the reason you want to do that is because a lot of times the object may be instantiated from something else, for example a form, and you want to make sure that when you call new it actually does implement the base's new. In this case we don't have that problem, but something that inherits from something else would. And I'd also like to make a public property here so that the end user can assign the customer name to the existing object. See, here I have it set up so you have to create a new one to create the customer name, but I want them to be able to assign it themselves. And we also have an issue where in order to call this thing, he's going to have to be of type shared. And I mentioned shared to you before. And this is so that people can access it directly, which of course immediately brings up the flag that these guys are not shared. And since they're not shared, I have to correct that by making them a shared field as well. Okay, that takes care of that problem. So I have a shared function that's going to return the customer and instantiate a new version of it every time he does, which means the ideal circumstance would be to have a way to just get that customer whenever you want it. So we'll drop in another little shared function that returns the current customer. Okay, it's as easy as that. Now if I wanted to use this thing, I'll show you what IntelliSense does, and then we'll go back and look at our application. I'll come up here and I'll create a new public class. And it's a good idea if you create these public classes, have a little test suite in here, and I like to wrap mine around the compiler constants just to make sure they don't end up in my actual end application. So I'll say if debug then, and we'll drop this little test class into here. Now we won't be running this test class from any place, but I want to make sure the code's not included. If you're not familiar with the if debug statement, what it means is anything between the if and end if will not be compiled in the finished application as long as it's compiled without the debug mode. Alright, so now I'm going to have a little test sub. And here's where I'm going to dim my first customer. As current customer. And now when I set it equal to, you would think I would be able to call up new. But you can see immediately that the singleton pattern doesn't allow new, because that is in fact private. So what I need to do here is just create it as the current customer, and then say dot. Now see where my keyword comes in handy here? By using new in this way, I've reminded myself that this is how I instantiate the first one. And in this case we'll call it Fred. And now you see I'm able to create the current customer, and that cust name can be equal to Joe. And that works just fine. Now somewhere in my process I may actually want to redefine that variable or make a new reference to it, and I can dim as current customer, and this time I'll tell them current customer dot get. If I ask the question now, debug right line, what is the customer 2's name? It'll still be Joe, even though it appears as though I have a new instance here. I don't. I have a reference to the same instance I originally had. So let's go back to our project a little bit and we'll watch it run. In the application itself, I've given you the code to play with. It's a little bit richer in the sense that I've also added in the ability to store my shovels and quantity and my picks and my axes. But other than that, it's the same thing. I also put a note in here to remind me to tell you that you also should implement iDisposable, because this thing's going to be in memory and it's not going to know when it goes out of scope because it's not sure who's going to call it again. So you want to deliberately create and deliberately destroy and dispose anytime you use a singleton object. So let's take a look at it again. I initially assigned it to myself as Pat. I can assign it to Happy this time. And I had gone to a different form, pulled out Happy, created a reference to the same singleton, came back down here for my order items, give them some quantities. And each time all I've done is use a different form to edit the exact same singleton object. So for my purposes, if I picked some information out of a database, for example, key fields and key values that I may want to use later, I can then use them for lookups. I can use them for almost anything you would use across the entire instance when you need a singleton object. Okay, this is Pat Tormey, and you've been watching How Do I Winforms using the singleton pattern. Take a look at the code when you get a chance. Thanks for watching.